Thank you, Karen. Thank you for that moment of acknowledgement. And as we continue, we want to ground us and why we're here today. Thank you, Karen, for naming that. Yes, it's Environmental Justice Day, and it is also the 17th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. I want to introduce myself. My name is Reverend Laura Kigweba James. I serve as the Director of Grassroots Organizing at the General Board of Church and Society. And last year we celebrated this day, and today we're coming back with a specific focus of extreme heat, but recognizing and holding that the reason why we're here, the reason why we do this work is from the legacies of the environmental justice movement. And so the legacies of both Indigenous, Black, Hispanic, and Asian communities of color are the environmental justice movement. The father of EJ himself, Dr. Robert Bullard, states that the environmental justice embraces a principle that all people and communities have a right to equal protection and equal enforcement of environmental laws and regulations. So although the Environmental Justice Day is not yet a nationally recognized day, environmental justice activists and leaders have been calling for this day to be appreciated by all. Activist Mustafa Ali, I'm just gonna continue, is one of those leaders who has been advocating for the national recognition of EJ Day. He shares that EJ Day celebrates the incredible work that climate and environmental justice activists do every day. It's a day of education, of action, and of hope. So EJ Day is both a celebration, and so today we are taking the time to be educated and to act. And this day is a memorial. As we've said, this day marks one of the largest US climate disasters because on the morning of today, August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall and displaced over 1 million people. And 17 years later, the inequities of Katrina in many ways have foreshadowed the continued inequalities that Black, Brown, Indigenous, and communities of color have faced amid the pandemic and the ever-growing climate crisis. Extreme heat is one of those climate crises that impacts communities of color. ABC News reported that heat is among one of the deadliest of all weather-related disasters. And between 2005 and 2015, the rates of emergency department visits for heat-related causes increased by 67% for African Americans, 63% for Hispanics, and 53% for Asian Americans, and 27% for white people. From farm workers to urban city blocks, extreme heat is a matter of climate and environmental justice. And yet, in the midst of these injustices, the environmental justice movement is equipping us to respond. Sonia Sanchez, in her poem, Catch the Fire, is a message of resistance and resilience, and it is the title for today's webinar. Sanchez asked the listener, I say, where is your fire? I say, where is your fire? You gotta find it and pass it on. For Sanchez, fire is not just a symbol of destruction, but it is a creative ability, power, and force that is to be passed on to build the just and liberated worlds that we need. So today we are joined by two incredible environmental justice leaders who carry this creative and innovative spirit of climate resistance and resilience, and they are passing it on. So we welcome both Dr. Sakobi Wilson and Gloria Ricks. Gloria Ricks is a native of North Carolina and a resident of Augusta for 38 years. Gloria has been married for 42 years with 2 adult children, 6 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandson. Presently, Gloria is the president and CEO of Mount Zion Community Outreach and a faith-based nonprofit. District Director of Christian Education for the Augusta District, and Gloria also serves as a voting member of the U.S. Climate Action Network, where she participates in action teams, develops the ongoing leadership of the Black Church Green Movement, and is a member of the Catalyzing Grants team, where she serves as a grant reviewer. Gloria serves in many public service positions in her community and is an active member of the Strategy Planning Performance Committee for the African Methodist Episcopal Zion denomination and a business owner of catered occasions for more than 35 years. We welcome you, Gloria. And Dr. Sakobi Wilson is an associate professor with the Maryland Institute for Applied Environmental Health and Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics in the University of Maryland, College Park School of Public Health, where he directs the Center of the Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health. Dr. Wilson has over 20 years of experience as an environmental health scientist in the area of exposure science, environmental justice, environmental health disparities, community-based participatory research, what we'll be learning a little bit more about today, climate change, community resiliency, and much more. He works primarily in partnership with community-based organizations to study and address environmental justice and health issues and translate research into action. We welcome you both to our conversation today, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wilson to begin. Share your own story and connections to EJ and the global trends of extreme heat as a matter of environmental justice. We welcome you.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. So a little bit background about myself. So I am at the University of Maryland. I actually need to update that bio. I'm a full professor now at the University of Maryland College Park. The work that we try to do is really about eradicating environmental racism. You cannot talk about environmental justice without talking about racism. So if you think about the history of this country and, talking about the biggest steals in the history of this country is the stolen lands of our indigenous brothers and sisters. So we talk about being on the lands of Piscataway people and the stolen bodies of our African brothers and sisters. So without both, it's part of the American story, right? Those two stories are part of the American story. If you think about it, environmental justice and racism, racism baked into the walls of this country. Racism in America's eye is America's apple pie. So when you have the evidence of racism, our policies and our procedures, right? This is part of the reason why you have environmental justice. I'm gonna give on this EJ Day, we have to recognize, the 70th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, the first anniversary of Hurricane Ida. Y'all know New Orleans was hit by Ida last year, the same day. It hit New Orleans, and the back end of Ida hit New Jersey, in New York. You know what happened when some people lost their lives, right? So you think about climate change, right? You may not believe in climate change, but climate change believes in you, right? So the folks who are impacted by environmental injustice are also at higher risk from climate-related perturbations, right? Whether it be forest fires that in the West, in California, whether it be droughts. We see what's happening in California. You see what's happening on Lake Mead with lowest levels of Lake Mead in years. You see some of the highest temperatures in many parts of the country, record-breaking temperatures, right? We saw the flooding issues in Dallas, right? And we see floods that are associated with hurricanes. Well, you look at issues around heat. Heat waves are hell for the poor and the elderly, right? I'm gonna talk about that a little bit more during this discussion. But sea level rise, time and time again, if you look at different climate-related perturbations, who's most at risk? Communities of color, our indigenous brothers and sisters, our low wealth brothers and sisters, low income brothers and sisters, right? Folks who have unaligned economic and social vulnerabilities. But I'm gonna slow down a little bit and tell you, when you think about, again, environmental justice, you cannot talk about environmental justice without talking about environmental racism. Think about the history of the EJ movement in this country. It began in North Carolina. It began with the Warren County PCB landfill fight, polychlorinated biphenyl landfill fight. You had folks in the church, right? People in the church who came out and laid across the ground to stop these trucks with PCB laden soil from being dumped in Warren County, North Carolina, a primarily what? Black county, primarily low-income county, a primarily rural county. And that's the pattern that you see with environmental racism, right? You see Black folks seem to be the target of these hazards. Dr. Bullitt likes to say, we don't have the complexion for protection. The 40th anniversary of that PCB landfill fight, y'all know y'all history, is gonna be next month, right? The 40th anniversary of that fight. And you have folks, again, in the church who played a major role. Church came together. United Church of Christ has a big role in it. Reverend Dr. Benjamin Chavis actually coined the term environmental racism in the fight in Warren County, right? But then let's go back to the church. And I'm emphasizing the church because of the role of the church in this movement. Let's go back to Dr. King, who I call the grandfather of the EJ movement. He was in Memphis working with why was he in Memphis? He was assassinated. He was working with the sanitation workers, Black men who were treated less than human, right? And if you go back to history, look at the signs they were carrying this around. I'm a man. What were they saying? I am a man, recognize my humanity. So folks that are dealing with environmental injustices are folks who have been dehumanized, right? Treated less than. And you can look at these issues when other parts of society, we think about the racial experience, the experience of racism that folks of color, Black folks specifically, I'm talking about, deal with, right? It's all connected. This system of oppression and racism is like an octopus. When you're talking about police brutality, we're not talking about that today. What's connected? We're talking about, Black Lives Matter, That's connected. We talk the prison school pipeline, school to prison pipeline, that's connected. Reproductive justice, that's connected. Driving while black, couponing while black, Starbucks while black, and getting business in Walmart while black. In your dorm asleep while black, in your house eating ice cream while black, taking subway somewhere black, carrying your gun, not sure you like guns or not, with a license, while black, making home, right? Doing your job while black, breathing while black. Let's call it breathing while black. For some reason, that complexion for protection that we don't have. And so that's part of the systemic structural racism, and environmental racism is part of the racism complex that folks of color have to deal with. So you might say, Dr. Wilson, what does racism have to do with climate change and heat issues? Let me break it down for you. Most environmental injustices are actually energy injustice. Let me share what I mean by that. If you look at the fossil fuel, sort of life cycle, right? When we extract fossil fuels, we should keep it in the ground. I'm gonna say that, today and AJJ, keep it in the ground. When we extract fossil fuels, whose communities disproportionately live near these facilities? Near fracking sites, hydraulic fracking, when you frack and you bring up the gas, right? Traditional oil and gas wells. Folks of color, indigenous brothers and sisters, right? When the pipelines, when you transport the fossil fuels, right, after they've been extracted, you've heard about the fights on indigenous lands about pipelines, compressor stations, trying to build these pipelines to rural communities. Whose communities? In many cases, disproportionate communities of color, Black communities, indigenous communities. And then when we got to refine it, we got to make it useful so we can burn it, right? Or turn it into plastics. So y'all heard about Cancer Alley down in Louisiana, St. James Parish, right? Think about what's happening in Houston, the Houston Ship Channel, the largest petrochemical corridor in the country. Refineries in Richmond, California, refineries in New York and New Jersey. Whose communities, what populations live in those communities? Disproportionately, folks of color. In many cases, Black folks, Houston Ship Channel, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx brothers and sisters, right? And then we burn fossil fuels, right? Gas-fired power plants, right? For electricity, coal-fired power plants, right? Highways and byways. Why are so many highways and byways going through Black and brown communities? That's not by accident, y'all. The National Highway Defense Act, they built those highways to our communities on purpose. So when you have a lot of commuter vehicles, heavy duty, medium duty trucks, construction vehicles, buses, going through the communities, what do? You're burning fossil fuels. So you're leaving greenhouse gases, right? And you're leaving co-pollutants like particulate matter. You may have heard of that's dust in the air. That's the thing that part of the reason why you have such a high rate of asthma in communities of color is because of air pollution, y'all. Nitrogen dioxide, knock on your door. Y'all heard of acid rain, sulfur dioxide, pull up your socks. All these are combustion byproducts. They impact your health, cause asthma attacks, heart disease, strokes, impact your blood pressure, can increase infant mortality rates, lead to birth defects, right? Low birth weight babies, right? Cause cancer, can contribute to diabetes, contribute to Alzheimer's, mutate your DNA, impact reproduction, right? Lead to premature mortality and reduce life expectancy, right? Your zip code is more important than your genetic code. You know why? Because of the infrastructures that you have or the stresses you're exposed to. I'm talking about right now, chemical stresses, right? Like particulate matter. Chemical stresses like volatile organic compounds. Y'all know that new car smell, hold your breath. You don't breathe that stuff in. It can lead to the inhalation issues that burn your eyes, nose, and throat. Children of color disproportionately ride school buses. School buses burn diesel. You basically have your kid driving on a smokestack to school. How we expect, let me say to some of y'all, we're gonna put America first, we're gonna put our kids first. Short-term exposure to diesel exhaust impacts the coordination, concentration, and focus. So all these pollutants, right, can contribute to urban heat island effect. They can trap heat, like the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide that you know about. Methane is a climate forcing gas, right? But then you get back to issues of, as you know, because of climate change, our temperature is increasing more and more every year. We're breaking temperatures every year, every summer. Last summer, we had the highest temperature on records, right? And this summer, many of our cities had the highest temperature on record. Remember last year, we had Pacific heat dome. Remember people died in their homes. The Chicago heat wave in 1995. Remember how many people died, right? During that heat wave. A lot of folks of color. We've had heat waves in places like Baltimore, heat waves in places like DC, right? And who disproportionately dies during those heat waves? Elderly people. I said heat waves are hell for the poor and the elderly. poor elderly folks. But why is that part of the problem when we think about heat in our communities? Because of the National Highway Defense Act, right? Highways were built through, remember redlining, y'all let me slow down a little bit, redlining. HLLC, FHA, some neighborhoods, people were able to get loans. Oh, you got a lot of people of color. We're gonna give y'all red. Y'all can't get no loans. We're gonna disinvest and divest, and y'all gonna move all the stores away, all the jobs away. Oh, got more white folks over here. Get y'all green, get all the loans y'all want. And so what happened with redline communities are warmer than non-redline communities. The National Highway Defense Act, guess what happened? You built a lot of concrete and asphalt. Concrete and asphalt does what? Absorb heat. And so it's 85 degrees during the daytime, and then at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's still 85 degrees. Why? Because it's an albedo effect. It's releasing that heat. And then guess what? When you build all those highways and byways, all that concrete and asphalt, and the buildings made of concrete and asphalt, right? It's heat absorbing. They knocked on the trees. Trees are good for heat mitigation, air pollution mitigation, noise pollution mitigation. Trees are the lungs of our neighborhoods. So communities of color have a nature gap. They have 3 times less access to nature compared to the white counterparts. And low-income communities have 3 times less access to nature compared to their wealthy counterparts. So you don't have the trees that helps with the climate resiliency. If you don't have trees, that means you don't really have a healthy neighborhood, particularly when it comes to protecting us from heat, right? And then add on top of that, think from an energy and justice issue, a lot of folks don't have access to air conditioning too. So you have so it's just not that not having trees, too much concrete and asphalt, but no air conditioning. And then you add up the energy affordability issue. Folks can't pay for their energy bill, okay? So these are all the factors that are part of this environmental justice complex that folks are experiencing, right? These are all the factors that put some communities more at risk from heat issues, right? So remember, particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, those are chemical stressors. Heat's a physical stressor. So you got folks who are dealing with EJ issues, they're dealing with both chemical stress, they're dealing with heat stress, and then they can be dealing with psychosocial stress, poverty at the same time. They may not have access to healthcare. So when it's time to get access to emergency services, there may be a hospital nearby, or they may be uninsured and uninsured, right? So all these things factor in folks of color having greater heat-related morbidity, more people going to hospitalization for heat, and then greater heat-related mortality. I'm gonna stop talking and pass the mic back.
Dr. Wilson, just thank you for the connection to environmental justice and having to, you can't talk about environmental justice without talking about environmental racism, but also just naming the realities of how when we talk about extreme heat, it is compounded with just a spectrum of inequities and inequalities that are directly related to the system of racism and white supremacy that make up this country, right? And how you said it, chemical stress, psychosocial stress. So I do want to pass the mic to you, and then we will come to you, Gloria, because I do still want you to offer, how then does community-based participatory research inform how we can respond to that, and specifically for faith communities, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll take the mic back. I know I'm a talker, so I'm getting excited about this, EJ. So I'm gonna pass the mic. I'm a professor too. I told you I'm a professor, y'all. Let me slow down. Stop being silly. So I don't want to. In the words of Justice Jackson, he didn't really say this, but I'm gonna say it. In the words of Justice Jackson, don't want to problematize. I also want to solutionize. So don't want to just talk about problems, talk about solutions. But he didn't say that. I just said it. It's a riff. I love me some Jesse. So solutions, y'all. I think there's a lot of opportunities for the church to be engaged in dealing with this issue. And so again, we got to think about how do we create healthy community ecosystems, right? I mean, part of the opportunity is one of my colleagues create the Green the Church movement. Y'all can join the Green the Church movement, right? That's a really important space to be in, to find like-minded, do like interfaith work, right? Through the Green Church movement. Oh, talking about interfaith power and light. You can join Interfaith Power and Light, because all these various faith groups can come together to address issues around heat and climate change and building more resilient communities, right? And what's interesting, I'm gonna get too professorial in this, but this is whole thing about building healthy communities and how you promote health and wellness. And we talk about we want to promote health and wellness across all disciplines, the environment. Well, the spiritual environment is it's not the most important part of that resiliency, y'all. okay? So the church has to be the foundation of resiliency in communities. The church, I like to harken back, y'all gonna go old school, Carnegie Wilson's Missing Education Negro. We gotta have the church playing a major role in what's happening in our communities, right? In a positive way, okay? In a positive way, being part of that social infrastructure, that resiliency infrastructure, church being part of the cultural wellness model for our communities, right? And so engaging in policies that are out there, for example, so if you look at, y'all seen in the news the last year or so, I'm gonna go back 2 years. The Biden administration has actually played a major role in advancing climate change policy, right? Through a number of executive orders, Executive Order 14008, which talks about, that's our Justice 40 initiative. You see the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed recently, and also, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act that just passed, where there's $60 billion in that act for environmental justice specifically, and $400 billion total as relates to climate change, both on energy justice, energy transition, right? So I think there's opportunities for the church to try to engage and get access to some of those resources, right? This church should be like, you should be a hub of rapid around services, one-stop shop for communities. So it's really about, think about y'all probably heard the social determinants of health, economic policies impact health, education policies impact health, environmental policies impact health. How can you take a holistic approach to making the communities that you serve healthy? Looking at the Pope's encyclical, for example, on climate change. He talks about climate change, but he really talks about poverty and the least of these. So focusing on those who are most at risk and most vulnerable, not because of their skin color, something that intrinsic, it's because of extrinsic, because of external factors, because they're living in poverty, they're dealing with structural poverty, they're living with a lack of access to opportunity. So how can the church be in this space to making sure that grant dollars get to these communities, okay? Then making sure that the Justice 40 initiative, as we move from a dirty energy economy to a clean energy economy, 40% of those benefits go to disadvantaged communities. How can you make sure that you are defining those benefits? Working with your council of government, working with your ANC if you're in DC, working with your town council, work with your county health department, your county department of environment, working with your state transportation agencies, because a lot of the federal dollars to implement Justice 40 from the infrastructure bill and the RA is going to come to your DOT. It's going to come through your state EPA. It's going to come through your state health agencies, right? So working with your state energy agencies, right? So working with those agencies to hold them accountable, make sure those dollars go to the communities with the most need. And then, think about the whole food, energy, water nexus. I can talk all day. I'm gonna stop talking so much, but I have a food forest in my house. I'm growing I got mangoes and I got mangoes. They're not growing. I haven't had mangoes grow yet, but I got mangoes in pots. I got some pomegranate heads. They haven't got any pomegranates. But I be picking figs every day, y'all. I got grapes growing. I got blueberries growing. I got blackberries growing. I got watermelon growing. I got all kinds of stuff growing. We need to be transforming our churches to be food hubs, to be food, energy, water hubs. Churches should be, when it comes to climate change and heat issues, when there's a heat event, you should be a resilience hub. So folks know where to go to get water. If the power goes out, people can go to the church to get backup energy. If you have folks who are on dialysis, having medicines and equipment at the local church to be that one-stop shop, that wraparound service for our communities. That's an important space for the church to be in. And then I'll say this, get to community, so I'll pass it back, I don't talk about too much. We got some dollars recently from the Bezos Earth Fund, and I do a lot of work on community science. I do a lot of work, y'all, but what we really do at our center, we do what I call empowerment science and liberation science. We want to liberate communities from sacrifice zones, liberate communities from environmental racism, liberate communities from environmental slavery, empower folks to do their own science, to get tools into their hands, to use their own science and uplift community cultural knowledge systems, right? And that's part of cultural wellness. So the idea is we do community science, and we're working through our monies, our new project, to actually we're engaging the AME Church, we're engaging UCC, we're trying to engage the Catholic Church to actually bring churches in to train them about climate change issues, EJ issues, and then have them, the parishioners actually put sensors at the church so they can track air pollution levels. Both particulate matter, which I mentioned before, which is dust in the air, the small stuff is the stuff that gets to your lungs, and also track temperature. So then again, the church is gonna be hubs for science, but then be hubs for action as well. And then getting those dollars that I talked about before, access to those programs I talked about before, to have a positive impact. And we create those climate resilience. Churches should be climate resilience hubs for communities. I'll stop talking.
Dr. Wilson, amen, first of all, and thank you just for laying the groundwork of, yes, environmental justice, the realities of environmental racism, and then moving us towards a solution where, as people of faith who are on this call, that we can be those resilience hub. And I'm so grateful for Gloria Ricks, because you're doing this work with the Black Church Green Movement. This is what you all do. So I'm going to turn it over to you for you to share more about your story and connection to EJ, as well as what is the Black Church Green Movement, and what is also the resilience that you all are committed to equipping the faith community to do. And so we'll pass it to you, and welcome.
Thank you, Reverend James. Dr. Wilson, there's a saying that I have, and it says that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I do believe that. But again, Reverend James, thank you. And I am kind of a new kid on the block in that my intro to, I'm going to not say environmental justice so much because one, I'm short-winded, but EJ, because it started with a simple conversation about poor and marginalized communities and the exposures and that they have to problems that are associated with resource extraction, hazardous waste, and other land uses. I'm going to say the short point of that is I had no idea what I was listening to. And the long point of that is I still had no issue, no clue about what was being talked about. But I was curious to the point where I had to do some research on my own. And in that research, I realized that I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was one of those people who, I walked this earth, I talked to people, but I never took the time to delve into those issues that affect the Black community. And Reverend Brindlin Bozeman asked me, she says, did you ever think about US-CAN? Well, you know, I didn't know what that was. And in my conversations with her and through the process of joining that particular organization, I became more and more involved in understanding the things that I took for granted. I never thought about the Black communities where even an EJ issue with convenience stores, how in my side of town, you have convenience stores that have, you see the beer and wine advertisements at the front of the store. You see when you walk in, you see the beer and wine coolers in the front. You see the tobacco products in the front. But if you go to the other side of town or the other side of the tracks, when you walk in, you see fresh fruits. You don't see the tobacco products. You don't see the alcoholic beverages are in the back of the store along the walls. And until I really looked into it, did I understand that was an EJ issue. When we look at deserted playgrounds, didn't realize those are EJ issues. When we look at our Black men standing on a street corner, dressed in a particular way, we didn't understand that that too is an EJ issue. But in working with US-CAN, it helped not just US-CAN, but surrounding myself with people who knew what they were talking about, and me kind of sitting at their feet. It allowed me to not take those things for granted that I walk past, step over, smell. And I will tell you one particular smell that comes to mind is my husband's from a little place called Franklin, Virginia. And every morning you wake up to the same smell. And that was for the paper plant that was inside that town, to the point where the residents thought nothing of it. And I'm saying, what is that smell? And everybody would say, oh, that's the paper mill. I don't remember the name of it, but that was an issue that caused so many medical issues in that one town until it moved away. And 20 years later, people are still feeling and suffering from the effects of that one plant. And since I've been the new kid on the block, so to speak, with EJ, Black Church Green Movement was birthed by Reverend Bozeman in a collaboration with 5 other Black women who were faith leaders. And I got to mention them outside of Reverend Bozeman, Reverend Dallas Conyers from South Carolina, as well as Reverend Bozeman. We have Marcia Dinkins, who was from Ohio, and Reverend Esther Williams, who was from New York, and of course myself here from Georgia. But we were committed to presenting to the Black church and to the Black community the clearest and most logical connection between climate change and the Black community. More importantly, we illuminated God's word on the relationship between his word and the church's responsibility for caring for the only earth that we have. Now, I'm going to back up just a tiny bit, because in the nonprofit that I am responsible for, which is Mount Zion Community Outreach, our organization started at middle school, and acclimating middle school students to their responsibility, not only by recognizing not only climate change, but the injustices that their race play in environmental justice, so that when they can identify it, and they even come up with ways. Now, some people say, why not elementary school? Why not? We just chose the middle school, and it has been very effective to this point. But to let you know about the Black Church Green Movement, Dr. Wilson alluded to the Black church. We all know it has been the nucleus of the Black community forever. Community leaders were birthed in the Black church. Social issues were discussed in the Black church. People brought their problems to the Black church because there they knew there was hope of change in their spaces. So sometimes we have removed ourselves from that thought, but it's still there, because you still have the Black church. It sits, in most cases, rarely do you see them in outlying areas, unless there's a specific reason, but they're normally sitting in the middle of a community. And truth be told, we still use the Black church. We take our problems there because that's how the Black people have often been taught in coming up. I know I was. And within the Black Church Green Movement and building resilience to climate change and EJ, we had to start from the basics, because if you took the words Black resilience inside the Black church, that's not a common language. So most times the people don't understand just those two words alone. So what we had to do is we had to focus on education and educating our participants on exactly what climate change is. I did a workshop with the AME Zion Church, or the African American, I'm getting all tied tongue, I'm not going to say the AME Zion Church. And I did one for Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. It was a group. And when I mentioned climate change and environmental justice, the #1 issue that was raised was plastics being picked up on the beach. And I'm saying, well, no, not particularly. That's not your primary focus. But I said that to show you that within the Black church, when we think of that, because that's what we're normally taught, that's what we did. But our job is to try to educate our Black churches and our Black communities that there is so much more to it, including the racism that Dr. Wilson talked about, including the injustices of our indigenous brothers and sisters. And with Black Church Green Movement, like I said, we focused on education. First, you have to know what. And with us, we tried to teach what the climate change is. What faces climate change take? the effects and who it affects, and what role the Black church and the Black community play in its responsibilities to care for, as I will say from now on, the one and only earth that we have. And what we did is we started out by teaching grounding in values, and we've heard that today. Like I said, what climate change and EJ 101 are, the connections between the climate and the social justice and the injustices. And I'm going to give you a few statistics on what we found in our survey of our potential participants. And that is that 51% of them said they were interested in, and mind you, we asked about climate change and environmental justice. And their responses were, like I said, 52% of them said that they were focused, they were interested in health concerns of their congregations. 26% said they were interested in learning about depression, ADD, ADHD, anger issues, etc., due to chemicals coming from factories and landfills in where they live. And 12% said they were concerned about being forced to leave their neighborhoods because of insurance costs. Now, we know that even though these topics of concern are not generally related to climate change, what it did is it allowed us to begin to understand and introduce to the group building resilience by doing one thing, and that is reframing their thinking to understand the relevance of climate change and environmental justice, therefore opening up an opportunity for a more in-depth dialogue to occur. Now, that is one of the keys to acclimating our Black communities who otherwise know about the plastics on the beach, using the blue can, the blue top trash can, as opposed to the black top trash can for putting our plastics in, because we know it involves so much more than that. So, and in addition to that education, and again, we are more educationally based. We are more focused on teaching because we see a lack of the education in the communities where we live. And we tried to teach them some basic EJ principles in that environmental justice, it affirms the sacredness of our earth. It affirms the ecological unity and the interdependence on all the species and our right to be free of ecological destruction. Those principles demand that public policy be based on mutual respect and justice for all people, free of any form of discrimination or bias. EJ also mandates the right to ethical, balanced, and responsible uses of land and renewable resources in the interest of a sustainable planet for all of us and all other living things. So that was our core of educating the Black church and the Black community on the beginning of understanding what climate change and environmental justice is. We also focused on people who could make decisions. Because if you're not in a position to make a decision, that's like, I think I heard Dr. Wilson mention something about solutions. I offer a solution room. You can bring your problems there, but you gotta bring a possible solution, because what it does is it opens the door to dialogue. And what better way for us to understand through education and dialogue that we have more things in common than not in our common goal. And with the Black Church Green Movement, which we're currently in, at the end of our phase one, those participants were now in a position to both understand with a paradigm shift in their thinking of what climate change and EJ are, and they could identify it, come up with possible solutions. So then we say, what do we do with them? Do we leave that education there in hopes that they take it in another area or another space? No. What we did is we offered a Scholars Academy where those same individuals who have now been taught, I won't say trained, sometimes they may be intertwined, but were taught, now they're able to teach someone else. And we take it as that proverbial snowball effect. So what we did is we are now in the process of training them to take to their congregations those very educational tools that will help them in determining how best the Black church and the Black community can work in the areas of climate change and EJ. Because if you can't go back, if you have education, Dr. Wilson, it does no good in your head without you giving it to someone else. I believe I can see your head shaking on that. Yes, and that is a premise that we hold strong, because what we've learned, and the other 4 women, I will tell you, have been in this fight for a lot longer than I have. But with the 5 of us coming together from different spaces, places, and experiences, we are able to put together curriculum that will serve such a vast amount of individuals in trying to teach, because again, education is a key for us. And when you lack it, we can't move from point A to point B unless we know what the roadmap is. If you take Highway 1 and you should take Highway 5, then what happens? You may miss the total mark in believing that you had the right road. And I'm going to say this because I believe to some degree it's true. I have a friend that says, to say you believe is to really say you just don't know. And if you believe one thing and you're not taught any different, then we're back at square one. And for us, we don't intend for any of our scholars that we call them today to ever think or believe or know that they're back at behind them when we give them so much information that they not only will it will benefit them, but it will benefit and take back to the Black community. Because again, I am going back to Dr. Wilson because he said so many things that are so true. It is injustice, climate change, and social injustices affect us more than they affect anybody else. We know, and some people say, oh, that's just a myth. Well, if you stand still and you look around you and you consider the racial injustices, like you said, are often tied to social injustice, the injustices that are only kind of set aside for us. Down to, I don't know if I heard you correctly, Dr. Wilson, in the, here in Augusta, I took part in an impediment survey years ago to find out that the Black community was being shifted to contaminated landfill areas where there were subdivisions, but realtors in conjunction with banks, the realty company, the builders were steering Black people to these specific areas. And if the Black individual chose not to live there, they made loaning them money, the financial institutions, a lot more stringent than when they were offering, the real estate agents were offering them new houses that were built on contaminated landfills. So we do know that they are tied together. And again, everything that I'm hearing, and hopefully everyone on this call will understand that, and when I say Black, I will challenge that word to a degree and make it not just Black, but people of color, because that's who it tends to affect. So yes, when I say Black communities, that is who we are targeting. But Black, there are churches, there are Hispanic churches in our communities. There are other people who are not white who are in our communities. And we're going to talk about that a little later, about how we can come together to move this this movement that it is further along. But that is what the Black Church Green Movement does. And we have come to realize that working together does work. And that no matter how large or how small, no matter what the denomination is or a non-denom, it doesn't matter, because in the end, climate change doesn't look at us as an individual denomination. It doesn't look at us as, and I said climate change, Dr. Wilson, we ain't going to that justice part. Climate change it's irrelevant. Any of those classified areas that we think of, race and religion, age, disability, because it affects everyone. So if we're able to educate the community, which involves our seniors, we do have some areas here that offer water when it's hot. We do offer places where, when the weather is really bad, where and churches that have the space, who will offer a safe haven for its people. Because more times than none, the Black community doesn't know about it. Now, like we do have Black churches, and I like to call them POWs, places of worship, who do cater to the Black community in areas of crisis. But more times than none, we have those individuals who believe that climate change and what the increased temperatures. I was looking at an article today that doesn't affect the United States, but how Pakistan is flooding. And Dr. Wilson talked about other states. Pakistan is flooding. They have more glaciers than any place on earth that is not, what is that word? That doesn't deal with the cold temperatures. But the flooding in the summer, the extreme colds in the winter. It's unfortunate that we still have individuals who don't see the correlation between those weather events and us and what we're going through. So it's my, you gotta make me hold my hand up now if I go over time, because like Dr. Wilson, I feel very passionate about not only what we do, but when we are able to reach one, then that brings about a change.
Yeah, Gloria, thank you so much. I don't want to pause, because the content of what you both have offered, I think, is just so enriching and important for all of us, especially the faith community. And it's interesting, you know, we haven't named resilience, defined it specifically, but if we go with the basic definition that resilience is both the opportunity and muscle to recover quickly, it also seems that education for faith communities is a way that faith communities can support their larger communities to recover quickly when climate disasters, climate crises happen. So thank you for the many ways that the Black Church Green Movement, that collective, has been educating Black churches and continues to do so. And thank you as well, Dr. Jacoby Wilson, with the wealth of information that you are leading with communities and for the broader community. We have time for one question, and this question is for you, Dr. Wilson. We don't have much time, but if you can be brief as much as you can. And they ask, I love the concept of churches being transformed into climate resilience hubs. Are there any hands-on resources for doing this in my local community? And maybe just to add, Dr. Wilson, what is maybe the first step that a faith community should take in terms of, engaging community-based participatory research, and what resources would you offer there?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things you can do. I mean, like I said, engaging with the Green the Church movement and engaging with your interfaith power and light, they're gonna have resources for you. I mean, that's a good place to start. I would say in the community-based business or research side of it, you want to find a local institution, whether it be a primary white institution where I'm at. I mean, I'm a proud HBCU grad, Alabama A&M here in the house. So if you got an HBCU or MSI that you engage with that's doing that kind of work, I think that kind of community university partnership is a good thing, particularly those universities that are in the communities, where the folks that come from the communities are impacted issues are getting trained to go back be part of the fabric of change. Also, the NAACP is a really good resource. They have their climate justice, just about not say every NAACP chapter has a climate justice coordinator, but that's another part of the social infrastructure should engage with. So, and then also look for EJ coalitions, networks, collaboratives. You got the North Carolina EJ Network, the South Carolina EJ Network, APE and California Environmental Justice Network, Michigan Environmental Justice Network, We Act for Environmental Justice. So and there's actually a climate environmental justice leadership initiative on climate change. So look for if you got local EJ groups to engage with, your NAACP chapters to engage with, and also the interfaith power and light green movement groups to engage with.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. And then just to go back to you, Gloria, there was a question about how can predominantly white churches stand in solidarity with Black and other Black Indigenous communities of color, specifically. And you gave this quote, that we do this work together, but how does that work happen with intention, with intention?
Yes, yes. The one way is someone has to make the first step, because normally, we've heard, and I do see where it to be true, the church is the most segregated institution there is. And like I said, if you make the first step, it can be as simple as a phone call and discuss what it is that you're doing and ask the question, will you partner with me in this endeavor? Will you partner with me so that we all will reap the benefits of how to navigate through this climate change and EJ? Will you partner with me in collaborating with what your church need or your place of worship needs and what ours is currently doing? Will you partner with me in determining those ways that will benefit us all? Because again, we all live here. We all need to find better ways to contribute to helping to with all this that we can do with climate change and environmental justice. And the operative word is all, because like I said, nothing's new. In listening to Dr. Wilson, who is in the Maryland area, here in Georgia, we are doing some, if not many, of the same things. But how will we ever know who's doing what, when, or where, if we're not having some communication? And to me, that is critical. That thread will either keep us apart or it will join us together in the same fight. And I've talked to you, for me, I am that person who makes that first step, because otherwise I won't know. I won't know that you have programs that will benefit either community, regardless of your race. I won't know that you don't care that the Black community benefits from the knowledge and experiences that you have. I won't know until we sit down at the table. And again, if we're not at any of these tables, if we're not in, for example, we have a nuclear plant here, Plant Vogtle, and I have begun to sit down with management and representatives from there who, in our opinion, don't take this city that is 30 miles away into consideration when there's an incident at their facility. There is a town, a very small town that is around them where they pump millions of dollars into one school systems. They have, in this town, they have one high school, but this facility that's run by DO, you know those acronyms, don't you? Where they pump millions into a gym, where they give stipends to certain residents that are in closer proximity. That to me is an injustice if I've seen it, because what it does, in my opinion, is it silences those Black people who live in those rural areas. Well, I say the majority of them are Black. Silences them to the dangers and pitfalls of possible nuclear events surrounding them by pouring money. Who wouldn't want, if you're a country town, who wouldn't want a better gym for their kids? Who wouldn't want to get a $200 stipend each month? If not to kind of turn sideways when there are violations because of just a monetary incentive. So again, it is the education, it is to inform those who don't, it is to go out past our comfort area and talk to those who are not of our color and say, look, can we partner together to help alleviate this problem?
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you. Dr. Wilson.
A few quick comments. Yeah, so yeah, that plant, I just looked it up, is mostly owned by Georgia Power. Is near Waynesboro.
And DOE is out there.
Is out there as well. So yeah, so that's a big issue when we think about these power plants. I have a power plant that's near me, Grand Gulf. It's in Jefferson County. They get no proceeds from the power plant. You're talking about environmental slavery for the nuclear power plant. So where I live. So that's an important issue. I want to add a couple of acronyms that could be useful, because you start talking about places of worship. We just had a symposium. If y'all want to go online to www.ceejh.org real quickly. We just had an 8th annual EJ symposium. It was energy versus power. And you said places of worship for environmental resilience. I'm just gonna give y'all that one. Y'all can come together and create a new group, places of worship for environmental resilience. The reason I say environment is everything. The EJ principles that you talked about are holistic. So environment is social, it's health, it's economic, right? It's political, okay? It's ecologic. So I just want to get that to you. And then also real quickly, if those of you of faith, your different faith traditions, there are a number of new opportunities that are out right now. Look for your local or your state or regional environmental finance center. So those environmental finance centers are helping communities access some of those dollars I talked before. So you could be at the table, right, to make sure those dollars are getting to your community, getting into the people that you serve, right, and your footprint, right. And there's another grant opportunity that's out right now. It's the acronym is TIC-TAC. I don't like it. I think the TIC-TAC is tacky actually, but it's the EPA opportunity called TCTAC. It's a technical assistance center. They're going to try to fund one technical assistance center for every EPA region. There are 10 EPA regions. So you want to get your church, and if you got a state organization or you have a city level organization, find who's in your region is applying for that and be one of the community partners that's on that opportunity. I'm applying for one in the Mid-Atlantic region, for example, right? So where our Mid-Atlantic region, region 3 covers Delaware, DC, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So if you're interested in joining ours, we're happy to have more faith partners. So I just want to say that, but go with power, y'all, because power is about empowerment. And so I just want to add that to what we're talking about. Back to you, Rev.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Thank you so much, Gloria. This conversation has had so much wisdom and just the brilliance as well as the resources. This is going to be recorded, so each of you will receive this in case you have questions about, I didn't catch that resource. You can play it back multiple times. And we'll also put together a resource for you all. For the last 5 minutes, 4 minutes now. Karen, I'm going to pass it to you. Again, thank you, Dr. Scobie Wilson and Gloria Ricks. This has been incredible. And Karen, I'll pass it to you for a call to action. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Laura, for turning it over to me. And thank you so much to our speakers. It has been enriching. I've been tweeting all the quotable moments. And so thank you so much for just the insight that you've been able to give and the wisdom to be able to give to us in this moment. A non-shameless plug for Creation Justice Ministries is that we do have a very robust church climate resilience program. And so we actually do monthly webinars to help churches to build resilience in your communities. And so I'm just going to give you the link right now so that you can be in part with that. And our next webinar will be in September. And so again, not a shameless plug, but just want you all to know an additional resource in addition to what's been named. Laura, do you mind sharing the Environmental Justice for All Act slide, please? So the next thing that we wanted to bring with to you all, just to have some sense of an action that you can take moving forward, is to actually present you all with the Environmental Justice for All Act. And so this is a effort that has been brought forth by Representatives Grijalva and McEachin, who began this very robust process to really have a community-centered approach to create the most comprehensive environmental justice bill in history. And so this is, if passed, a very historic bill that would be able to address many of the issues that are impacting BIPOC and or low-income households who are often on the front lines of climate change, as well as the environmental justice crisis as well. And so some of the noteworthy things for you all to know about is that there are, well, many things, but just a few to highlight in this moment is that this bill would actually make it mandatory that the federal agencies would have to actually consider the impacts on communities before any decisions can be made. And so that means that they have to consider factors such as public health. There has to be data collection and analysis. And so people can't just make decisions without truly taking to evaluation how communities would be impacted. And so that is a big thing. And also it means that if there is a belief that it could be harmful to a community, then it can't also be implemented at that point. And so there's more accountability in the pre-planning process to government agencies to not continue to cause harm on communities. There's also other aspects such as creating outdoor access for all. And so often there are so many barriers to equitable access to the outdoors for many communities, especially BIPOC communities. And so this bill would actually try to address some of those issues, making sure that public lands and water and other places would be accessible. This program would also give 75 million annually for grants to support progress to address environmental justice and public health issues. And so to these communities, and so many of our churches that are in these EJ impacted communities, environmental justice impacted communities, they will have access to additional funds to really become those resilience hubs that that was mentioned earlier. And then the last thing is that I wanted to highlight is that this bill would actually help with fair and just transition. And so it would actually establish that there has to be assistance given to really help communities transition and also hold oil, gas, and coal industries accountable, as they would be required to also do more transition to clean energy, and making sure that the economic impacts from those less environmentally friendly avenues, that those would actually go to the community so that they can become more resilient. And so there's a lot of good things in this act, and I'm happy if people want to reach out to me offline. However, I just wanted to share that we have already put in the chat function a link. So if you want to take action, it's very easy. It's as simple as filling out that form, and that form will go to your senators as well as your member of Congress. There is a Senate bill as well. And so the action alert that you would be filling out with the form, it's very simple, and it would go to, again, your House of Representatives as well as both of your senators. And so thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Scobie Wilson, and thank you so much to Gloria, Ricks, for being our speakers. Thank you for the wealth of knowledge that you shared. Thank you to being in partnership with Laura from Church and Society. Thank you for just being a part of this. Everyone, thank you for coming. And if you want to keep in contact with us, we will follow up to just give you the resources and the recording as was mentioned. And so thank you so much. Thank you. And please take time today to just remember those who were impacted by Hurricane Katrina. Thank you. And just take some time to also just appreciate the environment that we have and to really think about how can we be communities of resources, communities of change, as we want to make sure that everyone has access to a safe and healthy environment. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.